Awesome. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first day of this topics discussion at the Dalmatian PTG. On Monday, we had a session where, as usual, we had our retrospective and we came up with great ideas on how to handle a couple of things. For example, suggestions on when we should be scheduling our collab review sessions and a couple of other ideas for us throughout the cycle. I've worked on posting the recordings on YouTube already, so please check that out. I think it's going to be important for all of us to be aware of what's going on during the next release. But yeah, more importantly, understand what are the changes that we are planning. And also, I've pushed the change, as I said, for the Manila milestones in the official release um schedule. So yeah, please check that out. I mean, I think we can look at that later in the week. But yeah, that should be fun. And yeah, for today we have a couple of topics, and we have Morris and the NetApp folks joining us to talk about some topics they are proposing and willing to work at it on it. So yeah, I think everyone's in the room. So Morris, would you like to get started with this?
Yes, thanks for the introduction, Carlos, and thanks for making the slots available for this. Yeah, the first topic is a smaller one, I think. We thought that there might be the chance to improve the thing that the PoolWeigher is currently doing. We had a look at it. We want to make use of weighing the pools, so um, we want to do stacking. So that's what it's doing by default, I think, if you enable it. But what we noticed that it's in the way that it's currently working, not making too much sense. So that's why we were thinking to discuss with the community if we can change it when we have revisited how it works currently, or if maybe our understanding is wrong what this is supposed to do. So yeah, possible outcomes are changing of the pool layer or adding a new layer that fits better to our needs. So let's have a look what the PoolWeigher currently is doing. So we are in an DHSS true scenario. So Manila is taking care of creating share servers. I don't even know if it makes sense to have a PoolWeigher in the force mode, but it's yeah up to you to figure this out or to explain me what this would be used for, because I only know the other world was true. And let's assume we enabled stacking, so we set the PoolWeigh multiplier to 1. The reason to have stacking is it's better to handle for capacity management. So the pools fill up one after the other, so not all at the same time. So you don't suddenly get to a situation where all pools are full and you have to find new capacity. Your pools fill one by one, and you can replace them and add capacity. So that's a lot easier to operate. So let's go down to the detail of the filtering and weighing in the scheduler. So let's assume we have the filtering phase is done. We have 2 pools that are still in the game, pool A and B. On pool A, we already have some payload. B is a new one without anything on it. So now the weigher comes and sees pool A has already something, so we give it a weight 1. Um, and pool B has nothing, no share server on it, so it's got the weight 0. This leads to that the weighing phase prefers pool A because 1 is preferred above 0. And this goes on and on and on indefinitely until A is no longer in the game. So even if we have fresh payload from a fresh customer that hasn't deployed anything before, it still lands, it still is stacked on top of the existing payload on pool A. That seemed a bit uh, uh, not useful to us because the newly added pool would sit there waiting and not being used at all in that scenario. So it would only be used when A gets out of the game, when A is full, so to say, or for whatever reason being discarded in the filtering. So that's for the stacking use case, how we think it looks like currently. Let's also have a look at the other use case about spreading share servers. So if we set the PoolWeigher multiplier to -1, it should spread. Use cases for that are reducing single point of failures. So that, yeah, if there's already payload on one, I want to prefer to put my new payload on another pool. So let's do the exercise again, what the scheduler would do after filtering return 2 pools, A and B. A already has some payload like we had before. B is a fresh one. Now with the spreading, A gets weight -1, B 0. So now we prefer B. But in the next run, now this looks different. In the next run, pool A and B are equal. Both already have some payload on it. So the PoolWeigher is not making any difference to the scheduling outcome anymore in the spreading use case. So it really only makes sure that it gets payload if a pool was empty before, but afterwards all pools are equal from the PoolWeigher perspective. So that also seems suboptimal to us. So the proposed change is that we not only look if there is already any share server on the pool, but that we also look on the share network. So that when a new share gets scheduled, we would look for share servers existing on the pool that are from the same share network, so they have some relation to the so to look if the newly created share has some relation to the existing payload or not, and make the decisions based on that. For both use cases, for stacking and for spreading, from our perspective, it now makes more sense. So for stacking, if the share has no relation to the existing payload, it can go everywhere. It's not necessarily stacked to the other payload. And for spreading, the PoolWeigher has more impact. So it's not only impacting if you add a new pool, but it's also later making a difference on the scheduling outcome. Am I making sense? Do you understand the proposal?
Yeah, I understand it, and I actually I'm looking at this PoolWeigher after a long time, and for my mind, the first thing that occurs to me is why didn't we do the share network thing at the beginning? And I'm trying to locate if there was any discussion on that. And the reason I'm thinking that is because you probably want, you know, um, I don't know, like to serve all of your shares maybe on the same pool for a given share network. That's an initial thought, but maybe they were also just optimizing for how much compute is running per pool and stuff like that. So which is why you would want to spread or stack the share servers, saying it's easier to create share servers here versus um, spread the load around between the pools that you have. But I'm not aware of that discussion already. So I was just planning to look and see if this has been spoken about. But like you said, if you did add the share network awareness to this PoolWeigher, the difference that's going to happen is if we're in the stacking case, we're always going to prefer a given pool where a share server was already created for that share network. And if we're in the spreading case, it's still going to be a similar behavior because we're now looking at the share network as well, right?
Yeah. So it's within the same share network, the behavior stays like it is.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're coming from a different share network, yeah, you don't need to respect the stacking or spreading from other share networks, so to say. So if you're not in the same share network, you're not necessarily stacked to share servers that are already there from other share networks. Yeah. So you're more free, and with the spreading the same.
Totally. And it looks like, I mean, they did speak about the other case that you're talking about, which is, does this even make for DHS is false. And at the time, I think they leaned with the thing saying, well, you're going to get back an empty list, and the where doesn't really do anything. Um, so it's fine. What I see. Yeah, the outside, I think modifying this existing PoolWeigher makes sense to me rather than introducing a brand new one.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. It would be nice if we introduce this change, it would be nice to communicate it nicely, because or to try to make some noise about it, at least using the release notes or something that will make people read this, because I mean this can change uh, the behavior, and some people could be used to that behavior. But yes, I think this is a change that makes sense, and yeah, I understand the edge case, and yeah, it's a very valid one.
Maurice, have you seen the blueprint before? The one that created this
The one
thing in
that
the first
created
place?
this one, no, no,
Okay, that's cool.
had it on my list to search for it, but I didn't
Yeah, it's
didn't
really
see it.
old. It's ancient.
Yeah.
All right, I think I found it. I'm just going to drop it in your Etherpad. Yeah, the motivation seems to me that I mean it was the former, which is we'd like to place new shares on existing share servers and existing pools. And if you take that logic, associating them with the share networks makes sense, because otherwise you are creating more share servers on the same pool. So you're probably getting the opposite of what you're expecting. Um, so if you were checking for share networks, you're actually optimizing the resources, because shared servers are scoped within those share networks.
Yes, if you're looking at the installation base, then as a whole, you would get a fewer number of share servers then. Yeah.
Yeah, have you already tried this with some level of success in your environment?
No, that was just an idea so far. So I wanted to, since the timing was good, I wanted to discuss it first
It's
here,
okay.
and then yeah, to
That
get
makes
also
sense.
some ideas which the direction to go. Yeah.
Yeah. So right now we are looking at share server get all by host. We could just basically replace that with share server get all and filter it by host and share network, and we'd end up with I think you're gonna have, yes, yeah, you're gonna have all of the hosts and sorry, all of the share servers, and you'll have to just extract the pool just like we're doing right now, and figure out if those share servers are associated with those specific pools. And in some cases, share drivers don't allow you to map a share server to a specific pool. And this logic here of extracting host would just ignore that stuff. So it would just, all of those will just appear to be the same pool.
Mm. Yeah.
Right. Makes sense to me. Were you, I mean, seems like a simple enough change that it doesn't require like a spec or something, but probably referencing a blueprint wouldn't hurt to just, shed that, I mean, basically what you're thinking behind, enhancing the PoolWeigher.
So like the notes I have here in this Etherpad
Yeah, you
to
could just pop your
make it
list of, yeah,
somewhere permanent. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
I'm wondering, I mean, we are pretty bad at testing the scheduler with something like functional tests. And by that I mean running a full suite of Tempest tests. And as you can imagine, the reasoning why is because when we're running on dev stack, we'd just like to scope it down to one backend at a time, and we don't really have all of that kind of customization that we can exercise everything in the scheduler. But I'm still wondering if there's something we are tying to this logic of things are going to end up in the same place, and that might be something we just have to deal with when it comes. And typically, the problem with resources would come with something that's running in the gate, like the generic driver. That's my concern. So if in case we introduce the share network and nothing changes, we still consume the same resources as we were when we were running the tests before. That's our thought right now, that nothing should change um, when we throw in the share network in there. But
Yeah, because the tests are probably not that complicated in their setup uh, that it would make a difference. Yeah, you would have to have a setup with 2 share networks and 2 pools at least.
which we do, but it's very, very, very limited in terms of like what we do is we allow the generic driver to create as many shares, but and as many share networks, because we Tempest just creates these on the fly, but we control how fast we run the tests, so that I mean, so in a test we don't really create more than like two or three at the max. So that's how we're able to get away with this, only because we don't really have all those many resources at the in the gate. So yeah, I'm just imagining that might turn out to be a hiccup, but maybe it's not, because we're hoping nothing changes. Were you planning to work on this?
Yes, yeah.
Awesome, thank you. No further questions from me, but this looks pretty cool. I'm glad you found this issue, and I'm sure it's useful to somebody else as well.
Yep. Great. No further questions from me as well. But yeah, thank you for bringing this up. Seemed like a good use case, and yeah, I agree with not needing to create like a whole spec for this. Blueprint should do it with the notes, and then yeah, we can review the implementation when it comes. Um, are there any other questions from someone else in the audience? I'm taking this silence as no. Yeah. Next topic. I think it's also from Morris and also NetApp folks. I'm not sure if someone else from the NetApp team is joining, like Saravanan, Janan, or the other engineers. Do you know if they would be joining? Should I ping them, or do you feel like we should get started already?
Yeah, I also don't know, to be honest. It's also a thing we just added on short notice, and yeah, didn't find the time to have another session together to prepare for this. So I put in some notes here, and I don't really know guys from NetApp are joining.
Sure. Yeah. If you want to get started, we can. Then I
So
can.
we can just get started, and if they
Yeah.
come later, they can add.
Sure. Thank you, and thank you for the ping on RC Gotham.
Thanks. Okay, so yeah, then let's have a look at the second topic that I'm proposing. We have a nice feature with NetApp that is already being used by our customers, but it's not in Manila. The feature is called Snaplock, and what this does is it creates warm, and warm stands for write once, read many volumes for you. So to meet certain certain regulations, so to store something and yeah, be sure you are compliant with certain regulations. Yeah, currently this feature is already used. We have so we create those volumes manually for our customers, and Manila is not aware. And what we would like to have is because it's always a good idea to have an API for this and to make this a self-service, so our customers can create those Snaplock shares by their own, and they don't have to go through a lengthy ticket process and ping pong, and we have to wait long until they get those. And as usual, we don't want to simply implement it in our fork and be good with it. We want to think, can we bring it to the community? Are we maybe able to generalize it? Do other drivers, other vendors have similar features where we could put it together? Or get some feedback where we would put the feature, if not, or if yes. So if we were thinking of maybe put it as an share type extra spec, so you would create a dedicated share type for such Snaplock shares, or you can even make it more dynamic by creating a new field on the share, so you can decide for each and every share directly on create time if it should be a Snaplock share or not, independent of the type. And another thing we thought of that we could maybe make use of was adding a magic metadata key that we would pick up on the driver and act upon that. Yeah, and now I'm happy to hear any feedback to hear from other drivers, vendors, if they have something similar, and if it would make sense to have some general solution, or if we should concentrate on getting it in the NetApp driver, and or if you see no way to get this in, and we should keep building something next to Manila.
A quick question for you. So you basically are saying that if an end user creates a snapshot, is this a snapshot, or is it at a share level? When you're creating a share, do you specify some sort of a retention for all snapshots, or is this per snapshot?
No, it's the Snaplock is for the whole volume for the share itself, so not for the snapshot.
Okay,
For the snapshots.
makes sense. And what it does is, I've not actually looked at the NetApp documentation for this, but it is, I'm assuming, going to be
So you can mount that. You can mount the share. You can write files on it, but you can write a file only once, and it looks at the create time of that file, and you can only get rid of it after the defined retention time. So if you say for financial documents, you have to store them for 10 years, then for 10 years time, that file cannot be touched, and only then the Snaplock gets released, and you can get rid of it if you want.
Makes sense. So basically, I was getting confused by looking at Snaplock, and I thought this was something to do with snapshots. But so it's apparently anything that you write into the share, right? It could be snapshots as well, but it's
It could be
anything.
snapshots as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. And does this have anything to do with, is this a new feature or is this available widely in OnTap?
Oh, I think it's not a very new feature. Oh, those are the questions where I'd hoped that the NetApp colleagues would join.
Yeah, I have a feeling that so it's a holiday week in India, so it might be a really hard time for them to join
Yeah,
synchronously.
yeah,
Um,
probably.
but I think they're coming in tomorrow for one of their topics on backup. So we can table that question, but we can ask those questions. I think the reason I'm asking you those is because
So
you know
yeah, beginning with 9.1,
Yeah.
that's quite old already. We are at
okay.
9.14, 9.15 now, I think. Yeah, so that would be with 2 releases every year. That would be 5 years, 6 years.
Mhm. And in that document, I also see another thing, and this is veering off into a different question: supported and unsupported features with Snaplocks. So um, there are some things that you can do after you create the share today that you may not be able to do if you've enabled Snaplock.
Yes, I tried to spark that also in the Etherpad.
I see.
I have a point applications to possible actions. Yeah, migrations are harder. Yeah, you can move that stuff around because no hardware runs for 10 years. You have to
Yeah.
be able to move it to put it to new disks and so on. But yeah, so it would require implementation effort at several places. Yeah,
So what implementation would be required at the Manila API level, do you think?
at the Manila API level, it depends on what we decide. So if we decide for a new if we decide for a new field, then we would have to implement this new field.
Mhm.
Like I also did not come up with a matching name for this, like field snaplock 2, but it must be something general. Yeah. And if we don't want to add a new field, then on the API layer, it would be no change if we just put it in as an should have extra spec. The API
Yeah.
could stay as it is.
Totally. The reason I'm thinking like this is because, I mean, Snaplock is NetApp's own naming for this. But the other one, stuff that you mentioned, which is one, write once, read many, is a more, commonly used thing across the industry. And it looks like it is available in most, all of the big name vendors, at least. So if I'm wondering what kind of generalization could we provide, you know, I mean, one thing that we're doing is common capabilities. And common capabilities is just a way, again, to standardize on an extra spec naming. That's pretty much it. And if something like retention period is a common input, you'd standardize on that and tie it up with that common capability. So something like replication, right? Like we had an API that was about, oh, how do you create a replica? You could create it with an availability zone, or a how do you promote it? You could promote it with a replica ID. These are just how does the UX work when you have some feature that's common across all of the backends. So if you were to have worm storage as a common capability, what could you accept that is what does a user need to provide that's actually common? So that's a deeper question. I think we need a few more storage vendors.
Yeah. Yeah, good that you mentioned this retention time. Yeah, that's also the thing that is. That's why I would not want to have it only at the share type, because then I need to provide a share type for each and every possible retention time that my customer demands.
Yeah.
That's a bit too, yeah, a bit too static.
Yeah, we would need also to. I mean, yeah, I think that would likely require some deeper structurization. For example, if we are deciding to go this, yes, I think we should look into writing even like light spec, because I mean that way we could document what would be the behavior for this, and then we could try to get more input from other vendors as well, which has been difficult in the recent past. But yeah, I think we can. I mean, given all of this, I mean, we should decide on a pattern or like specific names, and decide how things would be named and how they should work. So yes, I think, in my opinion, we should have a light spec. And for the implications to possible actions, I see you added a question there. Yeah, um, snapshots, replicas, and backups being locked. That's a great question, I would say, especially considering, I mean, if the share is locked, if we take a snapshot, if it isn't, then, I mean, we could, pretty much be overruling that thing. So I think yes, we should take a look at locking the all of the things that come from the share in this case, like snapshots, replicas, backups. Um, yeah. So for backups, though, I think it should be a bit tricky because I mean we have the generic implementation for backup, right? Um, so if we use the generic implementation for backup, then I think it should likely be blocked in case the share is locked, because I mean otherwise you would be able to create a backup. But I think all of this is, I mean, this thing would be an implementation detail. But yes, I agree. Like at least in my opinion, snapshots and replicas should also be locked.
Yeah, they are interesting. There are two interpretations of the word locked. So when I wrote this, I was thinking about if they should also receive the snaplock, uh, and I think you interpreted as should we allow to do this? But it's also a valid question. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, for like also I think for backups I took more in the way of more in the lines of what you meant, which was should we also lock that? But yeah, when we have the generic implementation for backups, that would be more difficult, right? So we should likely block that. But again, I think that's an implementation detail or a design detail for this. So yeah, that's something we can set up later, discuss this. But yeah, for snapshots and replicas, yes, I think so. I think we should also do that. Yeah. Any other comments or questions?
On next steps, really. So I think these questions are valid, but we don't have the answers, right? We need to probably ask around if there are other vendors that that have the same feature, and if they don't, taking the extra spec route and having these other NetApp specific metadata keys, etc. That might be uh, you know that might be what you'd end up doing to support this with the backend that does support it. And we do this sort of thing as backend scoped extra specs, which are less common in multi-vendor clouds, but very common when you have just a single vendor storage system in backing Manila. So you do have a way forward, but I mean, I appreciate the thought that this has to be more generic than that. So let's, I think, ask around, and for that, I think the OpenStack mailing list is probably a good place to check. And of course, I mean, if folks from NetApp have some more information on this, that would be a cool thing too. Because again, like you're saying, the implications on the other actions, like for example migrations, etc., that will need new implementation in the NetApp driver, whatever we do.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we can probably bring this up in the weekly meeting and then do a mailing list post. What do you think? After we've gathered some more information.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Maurice.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Is there
Thanks.
something
Thanks to
else
you. Yeah.
you guys would like to add? Otherwise, I think we still had like 15 minutes to this topic. So I think, yeah, we have a couple of other topics already. But I think we could use the 15 minutes to discuss this thing, the cross service request ID, as everyone is here already. And yeah, this was in the parking lot previously, so we can use the time to discuss all of this. We'll have a break right after this. Um, but yeah, I think we can use the extra time. I don't know. Do you think it's enough? Do you think you would need more time, or should we try to use this time to discuss on the cross service request ID enhancements?
We can get it started, I would say. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So I think let's get started with this. Um, just like to get also some context to others, this was discussed in an upstream meeting a couple of days ago, the OpenStack Manila meeting, and Maurice mentioned that this could be nice additions to Manila. And I'll stop talking and let Maurice talk. And I asked him to add this to the PTG Etherpad so that we could have more traction in the discussion and have folks around discussing on these matters. So, yeah. Maurice?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Um, yeah, we are. So I'm with SAP. We are running OpenStack several services. So and I'm always looking to align them to have them yeah in working in a similar way. So I naturally notice when things are working in one service that way and in Manila in the other way. So that's why I came to notice that the handling of the request ID in Manila is a bit different than in other services, for instance, Nova and Cinder. What's nice, what we have in Nova already, you get this not just the compute request ID header when you do API calls, but you also get this um, ex- OpenStack request ID header, and that is a general thing. It uh, uh, doesn't have compute in the name, so it's not telling you this is a request that belongs to just Nova, but it can be a thing that goes from one service to another service, so you can really trace what the request did. And in Nova, that is even more important because it talks to um, more other services than we do at Manila, but still we have some interactions with Neutron and Keystone and possible others. So it really makes sense to well, have a common usage of this headers. And the other benefit of having this aligned is looking at certain middlewares that make use of this headers that are looking into this. So for example, we have a middleware that generates audit events, and this would also look at the common headers and add those to the events. And now what I have with other services is a really nice thing. I can look at my logs of audit events and find the request IDs, and I can go back to my service and look at the service logs taking that request ID and yeah, look at the logs that belong to a certain audit event. So I can really fast make the connection between those two things. Whereas in Manila, I always have to do some extra search. I have to narrow down on the timestamps or on the context on the project IDs or whatever to really find the requests that belong to a certain event. So yeah, that's the motivation, and I've seen the Cinder had a similar problem and solved it, and I thought, yeah, Manila is a fork of Cinder, so maybe we can pick that up easily, or maybe not so easily because we derived or we deviated too much. Let's see.
It might be easy. So what I see them doing is introducing a new middleware component to do the request ID handling. And in that, they've kind of consolidated all of the context um, that's associated with that request ID, such as setting all the project information from the token and so on, so that it doesn't happen too many times. I've found that what we are doing is kind of confusing because we kind of create a context object, update it a number of times, which in which this thing I think if depending on where the API fails, if it hits the middleware and fails versus if it comes to the API router and fails versus if it comes to the API code and fails, how we are able to respond also changes. And that's
Yeah.
just because we don't really have something that's that's putting all of this data together even before that request comes to the router, for instance, or something like that. That's what the middleware would do. um, so I like that idea. I hadn't seen that. Thanks for showing us that stuff. And I see other projects have implemented it that way as well. Uh, I mean, I'm just looking at uh, Carrot and I see Blazor, for instance, a recent one. Um, so this prior art.
Yep. Nice addition indeed. Yeah, would be nice. Is this something you guys would be willing to pick up and work on, or you don't have an assignee in mind?
No, I don't have an assignee in mind. I feel it. Yeah, it's quite deep in the system, and I don't feel I could invest time to get to know all the details to don't break stuff too much.
Yep, sure. Um, I think we can try to work on this. I'll try to find an assignee within the community because I mean, it's going to be of help for the CI jobs as well. Like when something fails, it will be way easier to track requests and to debug failures. So yeah, I think it's a very good thing to have. And yeah, I like it. Thank you for bringing this up. Yeah, I mean it's great. And the example from Cinder, we could definitely take a look at that and also look for implementation. Yeah. Do you have any other questions, like someone from the audience? Or
Yeah, do we have a bug reported for this already against Manila?
No, I did not open one.
Okay.
That's a good question. Maurice, could you actually report one with this discussion?
Yeah,
We don't really need a
yes,
whole lot
yes,
of missing
yes.
posts
I will
with
do
context.
a bug report. Yeah.
Thank you.
awesome, thank you. All right, so we have 5 minutes left to this discussion. Yeah, should we? I think we are set to have a break in 5 minutes until we get back to the next topics. Um, would you like to get started on the other one as well, or do you guys feel like we should take the break now and then we can get back to the other discussions?
You mean the last point, technical debt?
Yeah, backend driver operations based on research metadata update API.
Yeah. So basically, it's just a thought. So what I observed. So basically, we are modifying or putting few information into the resources metadata, and based on that information, we perform some operation on the backend driver. So that was the way. What I found recently is the code restructured in the latest releases where everything is moved to a file called metadata.py, and this file has the information as in resources and the methods associated with the resources in order to deal with the metadata, like resource metadata, get item, update, and etc, etc. So this method basically perform the operation on the resource in the DB only. What we want is basically to use the same methods to perform the operation on the DB as well as continue that path to the backend driver, right? The resource can be anything like share snapshot, or the share network subnet that we have currently. So that was the thought we had, and we wanted to have the discussion or know what are your thoughts on this.
So this is tricky, I think, and this is it's been a historic problem. So the way you're saying this works is when you create an object and you tack on some metadata when creating the object. That is one opportunity that the drivers have today to see the metadata that was added alongside the creation of that object, whether it's shares, snapshots, networks, whatever. But after that, we don't consider metadata to be something that the drivers need to do anything about at all, which is kind of why you see that implementation that says, metadata is only hitting the database, changing
Right,
keys, etc. is only going to be a database change,
right.
and that's because of the way it was designed, and it's the same reasoning as to why once you create the object and you start adding metadata, we don't really consult the backend for anything, the driver for anything. It's only going to be changes into the database. Um, so I suppose I'm going to ask you, what is like, do you have concrete use cases which you're currently using the metadata for, that you need to to be able to change through the metadata itself?
Yeah. So, for example, the two things that you have mentioned on the second line, the snapshot policy and the show mount option,
Mm,
right? These are the backend operations. For example, like if you remember that there was a blueprint that I had raised couple of years ago regarding the automatic
retention
snapshot,
of snapshots.
right?
Yeah.
So it's an alternative for this where the NetApp supports a snapshot policy, and we need to set that snapshot policy. So that is one example. Another is where we have to disable the path from the root file system. That is being done using this show mount option on the NetApp backend driver, and there are many others might come in the future as well. The thing is that if we have to modify these single entities, either we have to create separate APIs to modify that entities, or we can use the existing metadata
Mm,
field of the resources to go and perform the operation. For example, the snapshot policy, so we can set the snapshot policy something like, let's say, daily into the share snapshot, not share snapshot, in the share, and then the share will, I mean, it will go and set the corresponding policy into the backend driver, which will ultimately result into the snapshot being created daily. Something similar with the show mount option. So this is the use case, and I think might be other drivers might also need, because metadata is not just for, I mean, it currently it is just used as a tags apart from the scheduler hints, but we can have other metadata fields also that has some meaning, and user wanted to perform some operation based on that metadata on the backend driver. So I'm not saying the metadata, like basically currently what is happening is that we are just performing the operation on the DB. What we can do is extend this if there is any change into the metadata with respect to what it has in the DB. We call the backend driver method, and whichever driver supports to perform the operation, they'll do the respective operation. Otherwise, it will be stopped. Something like this.
yeah. Do you have a proposal in mind as to how this change can be made? Because I'm thinking, I mean, one of the things that just what you said, right now, user expectations are that metadata are just tags. We're not really using that for much else. And I'm surprised we had this snapshot policy and show mount thing. I'm actually not aware of this because of the fact that let's say a user sets this today and then deletes it. What happens? Like, it's a weird
So, if,
experience.
right, if the user deletes the metadata, then it will follow the same path that it goes to the backend and perform the operation. For example, if the snapshot policy field is being deleted from the metadata, then we'll let know the driver, and then driver will disable the snapshot policy on the share. So basically, I think update or create and the delete are the two methods where, in addition to DB operations, they need to invoke the backend driver by RPC and etc. and to pass this information to the backend driver, and then the backend driver will take a call. If the metadata is being added, then based on whatever metadata it is, it will perform the operation like create, delete, whatever.
Yeah, you kind of need to think of a vehicle to deliver this,
Yeah.
like you said, because um, right now, you set a thing, you get a 200 response back, and the metadata is already updated on the database, because you can do a list and you get to see the changes. Very rarely is there anything, any delay in that kind of a thing. But now, if you're doing something async, how do you communicate that to the end user? Because every other thing has some sort of status or message or some sort of a thing that we're communicating that with, to the end user. So metadata also needs to have its own state at that point, to somehow with some sort of visibility. I'm not saying it's the same kind of thing that we do with these objects. And there is also the concept of, if you I mean, today you can have share network subnets without actually ever involving a backend. Until you create a share, that share network subnet does not really get used at all. But the share network subnet exists with that metadata, and you could be modifying that metadata, and there's nothing that the backend can it does even know, because it doesn't even know anything about the share network
Right.
subnet yet.
So I'm not saying that if there is a metadata changes, then backend must do some kind of operation. It's up to the backend driver whether they have to consider the metadata or ignore it. In our case, like as you said, that this will be the vehicle to pass the information to the backend driver. And again, like if tomorrow we can add more metadata fields and keep adding more operations to the backend driver, or like I mean, for example, the one that you talked about, share network subnet. So even if we add the metadata to the share network subnet and pass it to the backend driver, it's up to the driver whether to use that metadata or not. Currently, we have two use cases where we need to pass this metadata for share at least. And with respect to async, this is something I haven't thought of, but maybe probably the DB operation is the important one, right? So we can perform the DB operation and pass this information to the backend driver. Now, if the backend driver operation fails, the easiest way is to log this into the error message. Uh,
Yeah, that's one way.
yeah.
But then again, you now have something that is different from reality. The metadata has some value, and the backend does not have that. So I mean,
So
and the only thing that's telling you something failed is an async message.
I mean, how strictly we need to keep this is based on our decision. For example, if the metadata is being updated into the DB, but actual operation could have been failed on the backend, that doesn't mean that the DB update should be ignored, because DB update is there, but somehow whatever the operation the backend driver was expected to do or supposed to success hasn't succeeded.
Yeah. Um, would there be another way to look at this, right? So I don't know if we're discussing this at this PTG. We might be just mentioning it tomorrow during the CEF talk, but I think one of the things that Carlos is working on is ensure shares API. And what that means is he's going to create a new API that you could call to refresh share information. Like it could be pending access rules or some export changes that an administrator has made somewhere. The IP addresses have changed, etc. So a whole lot of things that today happen automatically when you restart the share service, you should be able to get that with on a per share basis from the API. So that's one vehicle I think that you could use
But
for something like this.
that is with respect to the share only, right? Or is it for
It's
all
just for
resources?
shares. No, it's just for shares at the moment.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
For example, like if have to do anything with respect to the snapshot, then again we have to think for the different approach. If there is
Right.
no API. So in this case, we have an API, and now the thing is that whether we should use this API internally or not. Like currently, it is just updating the DB.
Mhm.
We want, in addition, to pass this info the the delta field to the backend decide ignore whatever. So that is one of the thought that I have.
So if we take this approach, my suggestion would be to actually expand on that UX question. And how do you provide that visibility? I understand, backends could ignore, backends could refuse, etc. But I, as an end user, would want to know that because I know I would then be able to correlate that my thing is out of reality, out of sync with reality. What I have as a tag which I thought was doing something to the backend, but it actually didn't happen. um, and nothing else is wrong with the share, so I can continue to use it. So setting the share status to error does not make sense to me. um, but it's something, some other extra feature that I have tacked on to the share through its metadata that's failed, so I need to make sure I understand that. um, User messages, good this thing, but again, I don't. I mean, as long as we're able to communicate it exactly as it is, as to what the failure was and what they need to do to rectify that failure.
Okay. So basically, if the driver is expected to perform some operation and it fails to perform that operation, then only the error will be generated and should be communicated to the user.
Or even if the driver has performed something, right? So today the API just
Hmm.
returns to the end user with some with status 200, saying I'm done, I've updated the metadata. So metadata is updated on the database, but you're suggesting extending that, and before you return 200 you would have placed a message on the message queue for the driver to acknowledge. And the driver is going to go process this information. It's going to happen at time x plus y, right? So after that has been done, has the snapshot policy been modified? I don't know that too. So it's not exactly an error message, it's just an async message. And that's what user messages are supposed to be. They're not really error messages. Now, we've been using that a lot for error messages, but you could really be putting success messages as well over there. There's nothing stopping us from that.
Okay.
I mean, just a thought. We don't need to design this year, but I would say think through the UX of it if you're planning to work on this and propose this change.
Yep. Do you guys feel like a light spec would be appropriate?
No, I think a full-blown spec, unless there's, I mean, I I don't know. I'm not a big stickler to that spec template, but you're now changing both the API as well as the backend, so
No,
might
no,
as well.
why would there be the change in API? Just because the response?
Um, Not really. You're not really changing any response code or anything of that sort.
Right, so there won't be any changes in the API, right?
Yeah,
They,
if you're going down the path of not changing the API at all, yes, there would be. I mean,
uh,
there'd be nothing to discuss for as far as API changes. But consider the spec template because we're also looking at UX. Like how is that? I mean, we're spelling out the UX in that, even if there is no API visible impact. Like the schema didn't change. We didn't delay the API by 3 seconds. We don't know. I mean, we don't know how long it'll take, but whatever. Like there is a behavior change that happened in the user experience itself. So even if there is no tangible response code schema changes, I would still use that as an API impact, saying today you would just make a change and not look anywhere else, but tomorrow when you make a change, you're gonna look here at the play for a success or a failure, etc.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, we are running out of time.
Yeah, ran over like a couple of
I'm done.
minutes. But yeah, no, thank you for bringing this up. And yeah, Kiran, if you can document this into specification, that would be great. Then we can continue the discussions there. But yeah, that's a good use case for this as well. Um, and yeah, I agree with you. So yeah, I think we can take a break now. We've been like 1 hour and 20 this room without having a break. So I'll stop the recording now, and we can catch a 5 minute break.
Thanks, Carlos.